I told him I saw myself marrying a taller, handsome, and wealthier man, but it backfired. Hello, Reddit. I'm not even sure where to start with this one, but I guess I'll dive right in because honestly, I feel like I really messed up. And now I'm dealing with the fallout of my own actions. I don't know if there's any way I'll be able to redeem myself after this, and if there is, I honestly don't even know where to begin. My boyfriend Matthew and I were together for about 3 years. He was an amazing person, a very amazing person, kind, thoughtful. He had this way of making everyone around him feel comfortable, like you were the most important person in the room when he talked to you. And honestly, I loved him for it. To give a bit of background, I grew up in a family where appearances and social status were everything. My parents were the kind of people who judged someone the moment they walked in the room, what they wore, how they talked, even the car they drove. They always drilled it into my head that I should aim high when it came to finding a partner. Looks, money, status, the whole package. It was never about how someone treated you or made you feel. It was about how they'd look standing next to you, how they could elevate your life in the eyes of others. And while I thought I had shaken off most of that mindset, I guess some of it lingered. Deep down, I still had this nagging voice in my head, one that had been planted there by years of my parents' expectations, telling me that maybe I could do better. Not because Matt wasn't enough, but because, well, he wasn't the picture-perfect ideal my parents had drilled into me. The thing is, Matt wasn't a millionaire or some high-powered executive. He worked a normal job, made a comfortable living, and was perfectly happy with the simple life he was building. He wasn't obsessed with climbing social ladders or flaunting his success because that wasn't who he was. And yeah, he wasn't the tallest guy in the room or the one with a chiseled jawline straight out of a movie. But he had the kindest eyes and the warmest smile. Still, there was a part of me, one I'm ashamed to admit existed, that couldn't let go of the idea that I was somehow settling. That voice in my head, the one planted by years of hearing my parents say, "You deserve the best," kept whispering, "What if you're missing out on someone taller, someone richer, someone who checks all the boxes?" And even though I knew it was ridiculous, because Matt did check the boxes that actually mattered, I let that voice get louder. I let it take over. And eventually, I did something I'll always regret. I started to feel like I was limiting myself by dating Matthew. Not because he did anything wrong, he didn't. If anything, he was everything you could ask for in a partner. But somewhere in the back of my mind, that stupid little voice continued to whisper, what if? What if I was holding myself back? What if there was someone else out there who could offer me more? More status, more excitement, more something. At first, it was just a passing thought. One of those little moments of doubt that we all have when we overanalyze our lives. But instead of letting it go, I fed it. I started to wonder, am I restricting myself? What if there's someone out there who fits the entire package, you know? Someone who ticks all the boxes. Looks, money, success, the whole picture-perfect fantasy my parents had always painted for me. And that little thought, it didn't stay little for long. It grew louder and louder, like an annoying alarm that wouldn't stop going off. I'd see other couples and start comparing. Not their connection or how they treated each other. No, I started comparing the surface level stuff. What he looked like, what she looked like, what car they drove, where they went on vacations. It wasn't that Matt wasn't enough. It was that I convinced myself he wasn't more. And the louder that voice got, the harder it became to ignore. It crept into every aspect of our relationship. When we'd go out to dinner, I'd find myself scanning the room, wondering if I'd ever find myself at a table with someone who matched my parents' idea of perfect. When Matt would talk about his day, instead of focusing on his words and his enthusiasm, I'd zone out thinking, what if this isn't it? It wasn't fair to him. He didn't deserve it. But I let those thoughts consume me anyway. I started to nitpick. Little things about Matt that never bothered me before suddenly became glaring flaws in my mind. He was perfectly content with his job, but I started seeing it as a lack of ambition. He wasn't obsessed with looking like a model, and somehow I twisted that into him not caring enough. And that voice? It wasn't just in my head anymore. It was seeping into how I treated him. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was slowly pulling away and creating distance between us. It feels so absurd now, so shallow. But in the moment, It felt so real, like I was on the brink of some big revelation about my life. I thought I was searching for clarity, but really, I was sabotaging the best thing I'd ever had. The feeling only got worse. It was like this nagging thought that I couldn't shake, no matter how much I tried to convince myself otherwise. I felt like I was restricting myself in some way, like there had to be more out there for me. I'd look at Matthew and think, this couldn't be it, could it? Slowly but surely, like I said before, I began to pull away. Not in a dramatic, obvious way, but in all those subtle, everyday things that make or break a relationship. I created distance between us without even realizing it. I wasn't as present as I used to be. Even talking to him started to feel like a chore. The little quirks of his that I used to find adorable now grated on my nerves. I wasn't as affectionate either. I started avoiding those small moments of closeness, avoiding kisses or hugs. It wasn't intentional at first, but it became a pattern, and when he'd try to bridge the gap, I'd snap at him for no reason. Every little thing he did seemed to irritate me, even though deep down I knew he hadn't done anything wrong. And it didn't help, oh God, it didn't help, that my friends were the worst people to turn to during all of this. They weren't the type of friends who'd call me out or make me take a hard look at myself. No, they were the shallow type, the ones who valued appearances and status above everything else, the kind who thought a person's worth could be measured by the car they drove or the vacations they took. Whenever I voiced my doubts about Matthew, they were quick to back me up. They'd say things like, "You deserve the best, babe," or "If you're not 100% happy, why settle?" At the time, I thought they were being supportive, but looking back, I can see how toxic it was. They were feeding into my doubts, validating my worst thoughts, and encouraging me to throw away something good because it didn't fit their superficial standards. Their approval made it easier for me to justify my actions. I'd complain about Matthew, and they'd chime in with their own stories of upgrading to better guys, like it was some kind of game. They made me feel like I was missing out, like I was wasting my potential by being with someone who didn't check all the shallow boxes they thought mattered. Instead of snapping out of it, I let their opinions fuel the fire. I let their words convince me that I was settling, even though my heart knew better. I let them plant seeds of doubt that grew into full-blown resentment. Now, I can see how unfair it was to him. But at the time, I was too caught up in my own head, too wrapped up in this fantasy of more, to realize how much damage I was doing. I wish I had stopped to question why I felt the way I did, or why I let my friends' opinions matter so much. But I didn't. Instead, I kept pulling away, inch by inch, until the distance between us felt impossible to close. He was so confused. He tried to talk to me every time he reached out to bridge the growing gap between us. He kept trying, bless him. He'd ask me what was wrong, why I seemed distant, why I wasn't as affectionate or engaged as I used to be. But I wasn't interested. I wasn't willing to meet him halfway, or even acknowledge that there was a problem worth solving. The resentment I felt toward him grew stronger with every passing day, and with my friends constantly backing me up and validating my shallow doubts, it just kept spiraling. They made me feel like I was completely justified in my feelings, that I deserved more, that I was settling. And eventually I made the stupid decision to end things. In my mind, I started imagining the future. I knew that if we stayed together, it was only a matter of time before he'd want to take the next step. Marriage had always been on our radar. It wasn't like we hadn't talked about it. When we first got together, we both agreed that we'd like to date for about 5 years before tying the knot. It was something we'd both been on the same page about from the start. But by this point, we were 3 years in, and I knew the conversation would be coming sooner rather than later. And instead of feeling excited or hopeful about the idea of a future with him, I felt trapped. I couldn't shake the thought that I was missing out on someone better, someone taller, someone more handsome, someone wealthier. It's embarrassing to admit now, but back then, I let those shallow thoughts take over completely. So I decided to end it. I thought I was being proactive, ripping the Band-Aid off before things got too serious, before we reached the point of no return. I convinced myself that I was doing the right thing, not just for me, but for him too. I told myself that it was better to break up now than to drag things out and hurt him even more later on. When I finally did it, he was devastated. He didn't see it coming, not like that. He knew things had been off, but I don't think he ever expected me to actually leave, and I didn't just break up with him, I crushed him. I told him that I saw myself marrying someone else, someone who fit the picture-perfect idea of a partner that I'd built up in my head. I told him that my type was someone wealthier, someone more handsome and even taller, and he wasn't my type, that I felt like I was limiting myself by staying with him. At the time, I thought I was just being honest, but now I can see how heartless those words were. He was heartbroken, completely devastated, and it hurt me too, because despite everything, I did love him. But I convinced myself that I was doing the right thing, that this was necessary for my future, for my happiness. I walked away from a man who had done nothing but love me, support me, and try to fix the distance I created between us. I hurt him deeply, but back then I felt justified. I thought I was setting myself free, giving myself the chance to find someone better. I really believed I was doing the right thing for both of us. For him, for me, for the future I thought I deserved. A couple of months passed, and then almost a year, and that's when I started to quickly come to the realization. I had made a terrible mistake breaking up with Matthew. At first, I tried to push that feeling aside, telling myself it was just part of the adjustment period. But no, it wasn't. That feeling of, oh my God, you really screwed this up, started creeping in and growing louder. The dating pool? Oh, it was a mess. It was nothing like I had imagined. I thought I'd step out into this glamorous world of rich, tall, and handsome men lining up to sweep me off my feet. But that's not how it went down. Not even close. I tried dating a few guys, but it never worked out, and then reality hit me like a ton of bricks. First of all, that rich, tall, and handsome guy I thought I deserved? Never found him. I mean, sure, I met wealthy guys here and there, but they weren't interested in me. I started to realize something no one tells you. Wealthy and accomplished people typically want to date other wealthy and accomplished people. And me? I wasn't even remotely close to their level. I wasn't the type to grace the front row at fashion shows or jet off to a ski resort for the weekend. I was just me. Secondly, I just couldn't commit to anyone. No matter who I dated or how much I tried to move on, I couldn't get over Matthew. I couldn't stop comparing everyone to him. The way he laughed, the way he listened, the way he made me feel safe and loved. It was all stuck in my head, haunting me. And because I couldn't let go of him, committing to someone else felt impossible. And let me tell you, dating out there was beyond frustrating. The rich guy fantasy I'd clung to, it turned out to be a complete joke. Most of the wealthy guys I came across weren't looking for love. They were looking for a good time. I dated one for about 2 months, thinking maybe I'd finally found my perfect match. He checked all the boxes, successful, charming, great-looking. For a moment, I thought maybe this was it. But no, of course not. Turns out he had a girlfriend the whole time, and not just any girlfriend. She was just as accomplished as him. I was just the side fling, the plaything. I felt so humiliated when I found out. I remember confronting him, and he didn't even try to deny it. He just gave me this smug little smile and said something along the lines of, "You knew what this was." That experience was a wake-up call, but not in the way I'd hoped. It made me realize just how naive I had been. The men I thought would be my ideal partners weren't interested in building a future with someone like me, and honestly, I started to feel really stupid for ever thinking otherwise. At this point, it was impossible not to look back at my relationship with Matthew and see it for what it truly was. Something rare, something genuinely special. But I had thrown it all away because I let my shallow, selfish mindset convince me that I could do better. I was chasing some fantasy that didn't even exist, and the realization of how wrong I'd been was now hitting me like a freight train. I was ashamed, embarrassed, disappointed in myself. It felt like I was stuck in limbo, trapped in this weird in-between state. I couldn't move on from Matthew because I still loved him, but at the same time, I couldn't find anyone even remotely better than him. Actually, I couldn't even find someone equal to him. Every date, every new person I tried to connect with just made me miss him more. These guys didn't hold a candle to him. They weren't as kind, as thoughtful, or as devoted. And honestly, a lot of them just didn't seem to have any real respect for me. I was meeting men who would suggest splitting the bill on the first date, guys who would barely make an effort, or who acted like they were doing me a favor by showing up. Matthew would have never done that. He was the type of guy who always paid, not because he thought he had to, but because he wanted to. He'd say things like, "I've got you," and actually mean it. He was a gentleman through and through, in ways I hadn't even fully appreciated until now. I started to notice all the little things about him that I'd taken for granted. The way he always made sure I felt safe. How he would walk on the outside of the sidewalk without even thinking about it. How he remembered the tiny details about me, like my favorite coffee order, or how I hated the sound of people chewing, and made me feel seen. But it wasn't just about the small gestures. It was the way he truly cared. Matthew was the type of guy who would listen, really listen, when I talked. He didn't interrupt or zone out. He paid attention. He remembered my dreams, my fears, the silly stories I'd tell him about my day. And now, here I was, trying to find someone else who could match that level of care and devotion, and failing miserably. Every new guy I dated just made me realize how rare Matthew was. Some of them were self-absorbed, more interested in talking about themselves than getting to know me. Others were flaky, canceling plans at the last minute or ghosting after a few dates. And then there were the ones who were clearly just looking for something casual, men who weren't interested in building anything real or lasting. The worst part, I couldn't even be mad at them. I had been the one who gave up something real. I had been the one who walked away from someone who was willing to give me everything. And now I was the one paying the price. It was a harsh, bitter pill to swallow. But there it was. I couldn't stop thinking about how good I had it with Matthew, how safe, loved, and cared for I felt when I was with him. And now I was out here, dealing with men who couldn't even be bothered to ask how my day went, or who thought splitting the bill was some revolutionary act of feminism. It was exhausting, it was disappointing, and it was entirely my fault. So why am I even making this post? Because I ran into Matthew a couple of days ago, and let me tell you, it shook me to my core. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't ready for it. I was at a bar, just trying to unwind after a long week, and there he was, standing across the room like something out of a shitty romance movie. He didn't talk to me, and I couldn't bring myself to say anything to him either. I was too ashamed, too overwhelmed by the flood of emotions that hit me all at once. But God, he looked amazing, like absolutely stunning. It was clear he'd been hitting the gym or something because he looked even better than I remembered. He had this confidence about him, this glow, and it made me realize just how much I'd missed him. Seeing him in person brought it all back, every single thing I loved about him. For a split second, I wanted to rush over to him, throw my arms around him, and just tell him how sorry I was, how much I still cared. But I didn't. I couldn't. I knew I didn't have the right to do that anymore. So we just pretended like we didn't see each other, like we were strangers who'd never shared 3 years of love, laughter, and memories. It broke my heart, and ever since that day, I haven't been able to stop thinking about him. It's like seeing him opened a floodgate of emotions I didn't even know I was holding back. I keep replaying that moment in my head, wondering what would have happened if I had just said something, anything. Now all I want to do is reach out to him. I want to apologize. I want to tell him how sorry I am for everything, for breaking his heart, for letting him go, for being so selfish and blind. But I don't even know where to start. I don't know if I should reach out. I don't know if it's too late or if I'd just be making things worse by trying to reconnect. I mean, what would I even say? Hey, Matthew, I know I destroyed our relationship and made you feel like you weren't good enough, but I've realized I was a complete idiot. Can we talk? Yeah, that doesn't sound great, does it? And here's the thing. I get how fucked up what I did was. I've had a lot of time to reflect on it, and I finally see just how toxic and shallow my mindset was back then. I've cut off those so-called friends who were always gassing me up and encouraging my worst instincts because, honestly, they were a big part of the problem. I don't want to be that person anymore. But even with all this self-awareness, I'm stuck. I don't know if reaching out to him is the right thing to do. Would it be selfish? Would it just reopen old wounds? Or would it maybe be the first step toward making things right? Reddit, I need your advice. Should I do it? Should I reach out to him? And if I do, how do I even begin? I feel like I need to do this, for closure, for peace of mind, for the slim chance that maybe he'll hear me out. But I'm terrified. What if he doesn't want to hear from me? What if I've already lost my chance forever? Please, help me figure this out. I've never felt so lost, and I don't want to mess this up even more than I already have. Update.
Hello, Reddit.
First off, I want to say thank you to everyone who took the time to give me feedback on my last post. Honestly, I wasn't expecting it to get as much attention as it did. It went kind of viral, and to be honest, I wasn't really prepared for the level of attention. The feedback was tough, some of it was harsh, and yeah, some of the comments definitely stung. But if I'm being honest with myself, I deserved every bit of it. I'm not even worried about Matthew stumbling upon this. He doesn't really use Reddit, and even if he does happen to find it, honestly, good. If he does, I won't be embarrassed. If one of his friends sees this and shows it to him, then I guess that's just how it goes. Maybe, just maybe, he'll see just how much I regret everything, and how much I wish I could take it all back. Maybe there's even a tiny chance he'll forgive me for all the shit I've put him through. So after reading all of your comments and taking in all the advice, here's where I went wrong. You all told me not to message him. You all said it was a bad idea, that the ship had sailed, and that I should let him go. I should have listened. I really should have. But I didn't. I still sent him that message. I sent a long, long message. I basically poured my heart out, told him how much I regretted everything, how I realized just how messed up I was, how I was sorry for pushing him away, for everything. It was one of those rambling, disorganized apologies, trying to explain everything, even though I knew deep down that words couldn't fix anything. I just couldn't help myself. I had to tell him. I had to try. And you know how he responded? With a fucking thumbs up. He literally just responded with a thumbs up. No words, no, I'm glad you reached out, nothing, just a thumbs up. And that's it. That hit hard. I mean, really hard. I'm crushed. I've been replaying it over and over in my head. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd say something more. Maybe even just a simple, I hear you or something. But no. It's like he's closed that chapter and now I'm stuck here feeling like the biggest idiot. Honestly, it's like I'm spiraling. I feel like absolute crap. I feel depressed. I feel hoarse, like I'm carrying this weight on my chest that I can't shake. It's ridiculous, but I can't stop thinking about him. I miss him so much. I don't even know how to put it into words, but I miss him in a way I didn't understand before. I miss the person I was when I was with him. And to make it worse, I've started stalking his social media. Not proud of it, but I'm doing it. I'm watching from the sidelines as he moves on, and it hurts like 1,000 cuts. He's thriving, living his life without me. He's doing better without me, and it just makes me feel even worse about myself. I really hate myself right now. I do. I feel like I've ruined something so good, and now it's too late. I shouldn't have sent that message. I should have listened to you guys. You were all right. In fact, I should have never ended the relationship in the first place. I shouldn't have been so fucking shallow. So, yeah, thanks for all the feedback. Thanks for the criticism, even though it stung. I get it now. I just wish I'd listened to you before I made an even bigger fool of myself.